Who are the top 5 players on the Dallas Cowboys roster heading into the 2023 season? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, today we are revealing your top 5 players for the Dallas Cowboys going into the 2023 season. Are you nervous?
I'm very nervous. I'm girding myself. I'm protecting myself. I'm scared that I'm going to do this list. And I don't know why I'm scared. It's going to happen. I'm going to do this list, and then people are going to yell at me on Twitter, which, bring it, guys.
Luckily, everybody on Twitter is very civil and nice. So
yeah,
it should
that's
be just
right.
fine.
It should be normal discourse.
All right. So just off the top, these are the top 5 players for the Cowboys going into the season, not what they've necessarily done in the past or like what they've done 5 years ago. Right now, best players on the roster. And we did not attach positional value because obviously if we attach positional value, Dak Prescott's the number 1 player, and then it just goes by edge, wide receiver. You guys know the drill. So without further ado, let's go to number 5. Who is your 5th best player on the roster going into the season?
Well, it's funny that we decided to go this route because I have my my kind of hot take at the to start with. I think the 5th best player, and I'm probably could be convinced out of this with another player, is Stephon Gilmore from the Cowboys. I was thinking about it, and I think that honestly, I think Stephon and Trayvon probably are like tied at this point. I mean, they're on different trajectories. One's kind of coming down on their career while the other one's kind of on the rise. I think Trayvon had a great step last year of like limiting a lot of the big plays. He's still continuing to be a threat as an interception machine, but also covering a lot more, so not giving up less receptions. I mean, I think you could make the argument, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Was Stephon Gilmore the best player on the Colts last year? I mean, I think maybe him and
Buckner would be the 2.
Buckner's
right?
the only other guy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I can't. Jonathan Taylor had a really down season last year. We saw Shaq Leonard miss most of the season for them. So yeah,
Quentin
it
Nelson
probably
has not played great football last year and a half, really. So
yeah.
So I mean, I guess my point is that like that's the kind of player that we're bringing into here. That was the kind of fun thing about doing this exercise, is that we kind of I got a chance to go over some things that I already knew, but just to kind of review almost like, and Gilmore played so fantastically last year. I went back and watched the game against the Cowboys in which he played. He was awesome. Magnificent in that game. He's just an extremely talented player, and I think so much has happened since we've acquired him that it's kind of not left our memory, but it's out of the forefront of our mind. I got reminded last night about how exciting it is that we got to add him to our team.
Yeah, and I think if you want him to be like your number 1 shutdown cornerback where he follows the top receiver, I don't think he's that guy anymore at this stage of his career, but he is still so good and he's so smart, and it seems like he just has a knack for making big plays when a team needs it. I'm going to keep pointing out the game against the Broncos that they played on Thursday Night Football early in the year. I mean, one of the best cornerback games you'll ever see in terms of making a red zone interception to get the game to go to overtime, to knocking away passes on 3rd down. Like he just has such a good feel for the position that even as we get into his, this is age 33 season. Yeah. I'm not too worried about him like falling off athletically because he's so smart.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that he and like I said, we mentioned that they're on kind of different trajectories and where they are in their careers. His is still incredibly high, and even he had maybe one of his best seasons last year. So
awesome.
I think you see a guy that is, he's a little bit advanced in age, but he's using his experience with his athleticism in a way that still implies that he may have a couple more good years left.
All right, who's your number 4 player?
Number 4 is Dak Prescott. I think that there's an argument to be made, like, whether, again, when you take positional value away from all of this, like, should Dak Prescott be in this list? Is he being propped up by his positional value? Ultimately, a quarterback's job is to drive his team to score touchdowns. And in the last 2 years, when healthy, very few quarterbacks have been better than him at that. And so I tend to think, I view this list as who are the 5 best players, not necessarily pulled out of their scheme and put into generic NFL team.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the 5 best players in context of the team they play? And Dak Prescott, in this system that he's familiar with, running, this offense, when he's healthy, is, I think, a top 5 quarterback. I think we've seen that. Now, there's been some inconsistency. He's had some injuries that probably, he may not be a great fit in every single system. That may kind of make the argument for why he should be outside of that top 5 for quarterbacks. But I think in the context of which quarterback is producing the most points on their offense, which is ultimately the quarterback's job, Dak Prescott has been as good as anybody in this league.
Yeah, and it's hard to argue. Like, even the last 2 years, and he's missed some time. I think 7 or so total starts during that time, but he's still thrown 60 touchdowns in his last 28 games. That is a ton of touchdowns that you're throwing. And yes, the interception totals were up this year. He had 15 in 12 games. A lot of them were fluky, like we talked about. It's too many. He's going to cut him back. I've got no doubt. We have to remember, like, whenever Dak is healthy and under center over the last 4 years, this is the number 1 scoring offense in the league, even more so than Patrick Mahomes. So if the goal for the quarterback is to score as many points as possible, there's not many quarterbacks out there that are better than Dak.
Despite missing the time that he missed this year and the time last year, the Cowboys were top 5 in scoring both years.
Yes.
And like, I think something like 111 or almost 115 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons this team has scored, including 63 last year before. Look, I think that you can make an argument. You could take any angle you want, but if we're talking about how they're performing in the systems that they currently are, like, Dak Prescott's performance sort of speaks for itself, and I think it's worthy of making him included in this list.
And the thing is that we kind of know what we're getting from Dak every year. Like, the health part of it's a different conversation, but like, if Dak is going to play a full season, he's going to throw somewhere between 28 and 35 touchdowns. He's probably going to have, 10, 11 interceptions, but you're going to have somebody who is hyper efficient, who can have a lot of volume and lead your team to a lot of games where you're going to score over 30 points. And there's just not many of those guys in the league. So I like that call, having him here at number 4. Let's get to your top 3 players, Landon, next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and the calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. It's Built Bar. We've been telling you about them forever, but you need to go out and try it. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so good for you, or they taste so amazing that they're not even going to know that they're good for you. You've got to try it. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real dark chocolate. And they come in so many unbelievably great flavors, including churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. Not sure how Built does it, because they only have 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even have to wait to get a box. We've been telling you to go to Built.com to order your boxes, which you can still do if you want to load up on some of the specialty flavors. But now just run into your local Walmart, pick up a 4-bar box of the cookies and cream, of the double chocolate, or the coconut puff. Or if you happen to live near a Sam's Club, like I do, you can run in, grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter puff and churro puff, and you can thank us later. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Every day or tomorrow on the show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions. So please make sure you send them into me at Marcus_Mosher. All right, Landon, finishing up with your list here. We're at number 3 of the top 5 players for the Dallas Cowboys. Who do you got?
Number 3 is CeeDee Lamb. I think, just as far as talented players on this team, you see it. I mean, obviously from day one when he got drafted, came in, was able to produce at a high level immediately, has only gotten better since then. The second year he took a real big jump in explosiveness and kind of his downfield ability and it just kind of expanding his route tree a little bit. And then last year he kind of increased his efficiency. He got more volume of targets, was able to convert them at a higher rate than he was previously. Which, resulted in almost 1,400 yards, a 10 touchdown season. I think he's well on his way to becoming one of the top 3 to 5 wide receivers in this league if he isn't there already. And I think he clearly has shown stepped improvement each year he's been in the league. He's still only 23 years old, and so like he's still got room to grow here. This is going to be like just to show you like what level of superstar. Like I think there may be some contract stuff with with Trayvon Diggs. I don't think they're gonna mess around with CeeDee Lamb. Like they'll give him the Brinks truck keys basically, and I think that it's well deserved. He's shown that ever increasing targets number resulted in more production. He's just there. We haven't seen a ceiling of this yet, so. I think he's just incredibly talented. And honestly, I think on a lot of teams, he would be the number 1 player if it wasn't for 2 absolute freaks at the top of this list.
Yeah, I remember at this time last year, there was some rumblings that maybe CeeDee Lamb a little bit of a disappointment, which I thought was funny because CeeDee Lamb in the first 2 years of his career, 1,000 yards, and then last year, almost 1,200 yards. It's like, that's a disappointment that he's not getting 1,400 yards every year. So what does he do in year 3? It's 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns. I think the only thing that's making him so he's not like a consensus top 3 receiver in the league is touchdowns, right? Yep. It's been 6, 6, 9. But we know touchdowns can be a tad fluky. Like if he has a year coming up with 15 touchdowns and the same 1,400 yards, we're all going to consider him on the same tier as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Like he is a bona fide superstar who, I mean, basically is the engine of the Cowboys offense kind of going into the year. I don't know how you can have him any lower than 3 on this list.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the touchdown thing, you have to look at the context of the fact that the Cowboys have the number 1 red zone offense in the NFL last year. And I think that's because they had a lot of targets that they wanted to get to, also including Zeke, who had 12 touchdowns in the red zone, if I'm not, or something like that. So, I think that it's more just a lack of focus there. They just haven't needed him. He has basically been the engine that's driven them from between the 20s, though. Like he is the offense and how they focus to move the ball for the vast majority of the field. I would imagine that he's going to get more looks in the red zone this year. I also think that in general he's going to get more touchdowns as coverage is sort of being pulled away from him. So I'm expecting nothing but huge things from CeeDee Lamb this coming year.
I mean, I don't know how he can really improve all that much from last year because I thought he was incredible. And it seemed like in all the big games, he was awesome. Like the game against the Eagles on Christmas Eve.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just dominated, took right over. Yeah. And like, I remember talking about it at the time, the first game against the Giants, I thought he had the worst half of his career, right? He dropped the big pass down the field, but it was able to overcome it. Had an awesome second half, including a big reception that put him at the 1 yard line, then a one-handed reception for a touchdown. Then he converted on a 4th and 3. There's just not a lot of holes in his game. So he's probably, for me, one of the most fun players on the team to watch. And I can't wait to see how he grows here in year 4. Let's talk about your second ranked player on the team, Landon. I've got a feeling I know who this is. Is it a certain guard who's right behind my shoulder here?
No, it is not. It is Micah Parsons. And
interesting. Okay.
So
you thought your hot take was having Stephon Gilmore or 5, but no, that's
so.
Go ahead.
Here's the thing: Marcus and I had a brief conversation yesterday about this show, what we were going to do, and kind of just briefly went over it. And we had a discussion. Look, I think the guard that you're referring to over your shoulder may still make a showing on this list. I think that here's what Micah Parsons is: a Hall of Famer. Basically, he's on his way. Like I have no doubts, right? Like, but Zach Martin,
pace.
But Zach Martin is a Hall of Famer, like walking around. Like he could probably wear his gold jacket out on the field if he wanted to.
Let's save our discussion on him because I do want to get into depth on Zach Martin, but let's talk about Parsons at 2.
Okay, and I guess just to parse Parsons, why I'm doing him second versus is I think they're both gold jacket folks. One of them's just well into his career, but let's talk about Parsons. He's good. He's a very good football player.
Good analysis. They pay you the big
look,
there.
He changed the whole trajectory of the franchise. You know, like I think this is a team that before Micah Parsons came in, you didn't really have the pass rush prowess that you needed. You didn't have the kind of overall talent that you needed to really truly be considered a contender, right? Like I think they before Parsons they were just a tier beneath where they needed to be in a contention. Having a guy like Micah Parsons, and I think the thing is that we got to continually remember that this is a non-valued list. Like this is not about positional value. Yes. But the fact is that you have a guy like Micah Parsons in one of the most valuable positions in all of football. It changes the trajectory of the team. And I think that's what we've seen here is he's had 26.5 sacks in 2 seasons. I mean, the fact that he had 13 sacks his rookie year is just absolutely absurd. I mean, that's why he was defensive rookie of the year. He's comes into year 2, improves on that, it gets more attention than he did last year and has actually more sacks than he did, including a fumble return for a touchdown that was just unreal that he was able to do that. Yeah. He was an MVP voter. He got MVP votes. He got Defensive Player of the Year votes. I think that Micah Parsons changes the trajectory of this defense in a way that very few players can individually on their team. And what he does to make your defense go from, okay, pretty good, to in conversation to being the best defense in football. I think it shows you exactly, not only the value of his position, but completely separate of that, how good he is. Like, and then that's not even including the whole conversation about the fact that he plays linebacker if you want him to, the fact that he can, rush the passer outside, inside, the fact that he did all of this kind of on a whim his rookie year while trying to figure out what a pass rusher does in the NFL. The guy is immensely talented, and that all doesn't speak to the thing that makes him who he really is, and that's his mentality, and that's his drive and his focus. He's a funny guy. He likes to have fun. He's sociable. He's hilarious to follow and listen to. But when he's serious, when you get him actually talking about football, I don't know that I've ever seen. I've seen other people that level of focused, but they, most all of those folks are all wearing gold jackets themselves right now.
I mean, there's a million different things that we could say about Micah Parsons and why he's so great. But I will say the 2 games that he had in the playoffs this year, I think even opened my eyes a little bit more. You watched the Tampa Bay game, the very first play of the game, he makes a tackle for a loss. And it just kind of set the tone like, okay, this is
happening all day, day, guys, all day.
He played 79 snaps in the Tampa Bay game. He only missed 4 snaps in that game. And the only reason why that he didn't play the whole game is because the Cowboys were blowing out Tampa Bay by so much, right? He played every snap in the San Francisco game. And it just reminded me of one of those like almost basketball performances like, hey, LeBron, we're going to need you for 48 minutes. Find ways to rest between plays or whatever, but you're going to be out there. And the Cowboys did that with Parsons. It's like, hey, when you're not rushing the passer, we're going to put you at linebacker to give you a little bit of a breather, which is still absolutely insane. He is just one of those generational defensive players that, and you mentioned, changes the trajectory of your defense. Dan Quinn deserves a lot of credit here.
Absolutely.
But it's not like Dan Quinn's defenses have been great every year in his career. Like, he's had some really bad defenses. Micah Parsons, I think, is a bigger reason why the Cowboys have had success more than Dan Quinn.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say, that it's a combination of those, and that Parsons probably may not have been as productive. Let's say not. I think his talent is his, right, but I think Dan Quinn did know how to unlock that in order to create production there. But I think, look, he's clearly one of the most incredibly talented, physically talented human beings we've seen play football in a really, really long time. And I guess I'll just go back to one thing to describe how good Micah Parsons is. In the history of like player comparisons, we've always viewed comparing rookies to Hall of Famers or all-time greats as ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do you remember the point when the Lawrence Taylor comparisons to Micah Parsons became not ridiculous? Because it was pretty early on in his career where you're like, oh, come on, Lawrence Taylor. All right. And then you're like, oh, no, wait, this guy maybe could be Lawrence Taylor. Like, and the fact that we have that conversation is just absolutely.
I actually remember the game. It was the Kansas City game that they played in Kansas City, where the offense was horrendous in that game, but the defense, because of Parsons, almost won them that game, and they held the Chiefs, I think, to like 19 points. That's when I was like, okay, this guy's different.
The Cowboys only scored 9 points that game, and they were in it for a long period of time because because Parsons was just harassing the quarterback. He had 2 sacks in that game and tackles for loss.
That's when it felt like this is something different. But we need to get to your number 1 player, Landon. Let's do that when we get back. All right, just to recap Landon's list so far, at number 5, we got Stephon Gilmore. At number 4, it's Dak Prescott. At number 3, CeeDee Lamb. At number 2, Micah Parsons. Just want to let you guys know, at McCool BCB, left off Tony Pollard, who I actually had on my list.
I definitely considered him. But give me your elevator pitch for Tony Pollard in this list.
I mean, the offense kind of fell apart when he wasn't on the field last year. Like, he was the guy that gave them the speed and the explosiveness. Every time he touched the ball, he was a threat to score. They used him as a receiver. He was I thought he got so much better in like the short yardage stuff last year. If we're not talking about value, but just pure players, I kind of think Pollard might be one of the top 2 or 3 backs in the NFL right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's definitely a lot of different ways that you can view his production and say that. And I that was a lot of the argument that I had in my mind. I was thinking about him at 5 as well. I think there was a cluster of like 4 or 5 guys that I had at 5, honestly.
Tony Pollard, Trayvon Diggs. I mean, Terrence Steele, before he got hurt, was having an awesome year, right? Like, there's a lot of players that you could put in that conversation. But your player at number 1 is...
It's Tristan Vizcaino, the kicker from Washington. No, it's Zach Martin. I mean, I've always been a huge offensive line fan, obviously, and watching offensive line is one of my favorite parts of this. He is just like Nate Tice sometimes refers to Dak Prescott as a machine, as a quarterbacking machine. Honestly, we should reserve that for Zach Martin. Zach Martin has done what he's done for for a decade, and then on top of that, it's like such high quality, and it's always been of such high quality. He stepped onto the field his rookie year, and he became the best guard in football. Game 2, maybe. I mean, he's just been so incredible and so consistently incredible at a position that doesn't get noticed by the layman, doesn't get noticed regularly by the average Joe who watches football. But his continued dominance and just like incredibly high level floor of play is just absolutely bonkers. I mean, and really, we have a hard time quantifying it because it's a position, like we said, it's hard to quantify guard play, right? I do think the one stat that kind of plays it out is that he still, if I'm not mistaken, has more All-Pro years than he does holding calls in his career, or at least it's tied.
I got it right here. He's got 8 Pro Bowls and 7 holdings.
That's ridiculous, guys. Like that's so far beyond ridiculous. Like, and that just shows you the floor of what his technique is. Like it's just so refined that he can do this over and over and over again at such a high level, dominating players, and still do it without cheating, essentially, or at least getting caught cheating. Yeah. Let's say that, right? I think that Zach Martin is one of the most underrated players in football. I think it's still, even now, still, it's hard to kind of, like I said, it's hard to quantify what he does, but every once in a while you get a glimpse at it. It's him stepping out into play offensive tackle without having played it in years and years and years, and just shutting down the right side. Like, oh yeah, you need me to play tackle real quick? Cool. That's cool. I'll do that. And then just dominating there, and then just stepping right back into being the best right guard in football. Zach Martin, like I said, I think I would petition the league that he should be allowed to play the games with the gold jacket on at the time. I think he's that good. And I think that he should be and will be a first ballot Hall of Famer when he's done.
Yeah. Couple things really quickly. So again, 8 Pro Bowls, 6 All-Pro teams. I know we're still a little bit early in the decade. It's only 2023, but if we assume Martin plays 2 to 3 more years, I think he could be one of 3 players all time that has been on 2 all-decade teams. He was on the Hall of Fame all 2010s team. Yeah. And I think he's going to make this decade's Hall of Fame team as well, because there's no guard in the league that's been better than him for the first 3 years of the decade. I mean, he's unbelievable. And I think he's got a chance to go down as at worst, one of the top 5 guards of all time, at worst.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think, you'll be arguing with with at least one other Cowboys guard. So, I think, what'd you say?
Andre Gerard.
Gerard. Yeah. That was John Giesick is who I was talking about. I think you, like I said, it's a position that's hard. It's hard to kind of quantify. It's hard to show folks who don't know what they're necessarily looking at, how good he is. You'll see the random kind of pancake blocks that they'll show and that sort of thing. But that's not what makes Zach Martin great. What makes Zach Martin great is Zach Martin every single day, every single snap, even in training camp. He doesn't lose snaps. He doesn't lose in training camp snaps. He takes it incredibly serious. He works incredibly hard. He's an incredibly talented dude, and the Cowboys are very lucky to have him.
So Zach Martin has played over 9,000 career offensive snaps for the Cowboys. How many of those do you think have been bad snaps? Like 15, 16?
Probably something like that. Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. So again, just to recap, Landon's top 5 players for the Dallas Cowboys. We keep doing this.
Oh God.
I like this list. I think it's very good. Okay. Stephon Gilmore at 5, Dak Prescott at 4, CeeDee Lamb at 3, Micah Parsons at 2, Zach Martin at 1. I think the top 3 names, I don't think you can argue that it's not one of those top 3 guys. And if you want to say that Parsons is the best and Zach Martin's 2, I don't think anybody's going to fight you on that. But I think that's pretty clearly the top 3 guys. And then after that, a little bit of a cluster between Dak and Gilmore and Trevon Diggs and DeMarcus Lawrence and Tony Pollard. I think the biggest takeaway is Cowboys have a lot of talent on this team. So we expect this Cowboys team to be very, very good this upcoming season. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, tomorrow on the show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions, so please send them in. I'm sure nobody's going to be upset with Landon at all. It's going to be awesome. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at
or don't, guys, or don't after today if you need to.
We'll see you guys tomorrow.